On a lively Friday night, the bar buzzed with energy, a blend of laughter, animated conversations, and the rhythmic clinking of glasses. Yet, despite the vibrant atmosphere, Thomas felt like an outsider, trapped in a moment that felt both surreal and painfully real. He sat at the bar, his drink untouched, his gaze fixed on his wife, Jessica. She exuded a glow that felt unfamiliar to him. The dim lighting flickered, reflecting off the glasses, but it wasn't the lights that made her eyes sparkle. It was the attention she received from the man beside her. Thomas's heartbeat quickened as he watched Jessica interact with Alex, a man he barely knew. From a distance, their exchange seemed innocent, just two friends sharing a laugh. But there was something in Alex's posture, the way his arm rested comfortably along the back of Jessica's chair, that sent a wave of unease through Thomas. The way Jessica leaned in, her fingers lingering momentarily on Alex's arm, felt like an intrusion, a betrayal of the sacred bond they once shared. Every smile she directed at Alex sliced through Thomas like a blade, deepening the sense of confusion and heartache within him. He traced the rim of his glass with a restless finger, his mind spiraling. He clung desperately to the belief that Jessica was merely being friendly, attempting to rationalize her behavior in a futile effort to calm the growing storm within him. The laughter that once filled their home now echoed hollowly in his ears. Each peal of amusement was a reminder of the distance that had crept between them. His chest felt heavy, burdened by an unbearable weight. Chris, an old friend, interrupted his racing thoughts, standing beside him with concern etched across his face. "This doesn't look good, man," he said, his voice laced with sympathy. Thomas remained silent, humiliation washing over him like an unrelenting tide, making him feel invisible amidst the crowd. The weight of Jessica's laughter, shared so freely with Alex, felt suffocating, a painful reminder of a reality he wasn't ready to face. Finally, unable to endure the sight any longer, Thomas pushed back his chair and rose to his feet. He felt torn. One part of him wanted to vanish into the night, while another, driven by a desperate need for answers, propelled him forward. As he approached Jessica, the world around him blurred into the background. "Jessica," he said, his voice firm but trembling with emotion. Their eyes met for the first time that night, and for a fleeting moment, he saw surprise flicker in hers before she quickly masked it with the bright, cheerful smile he had once cherished. "Oh, hey, sweetheart," she greeted, her tone light and carefree, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. "You remember Alex, don't you?" Thomas's stomach twisted at the mention of Alex's name. The self-assured smirk on the man's face only deepened the pit forming in his gut. "We need to talk," Thomas said, his voice colder than he intended, the urgency of the moment wrapping around him like a noose. He struggled to maintain his composure. Jessica hesitated, her gaze shifting to Alex, who seemed to relish the tension with smug amusement. "Jessica, Thomas started, but she cut him off, her voice dismissive. "We're just—" "No," he interjected, his frustration spilling over. "We need to talk. Now." Her demeanor shifted as she exhaled sharply, murmuring something to Alex before reluctantly following Thomas to a quieter corner of the bar. "What is it?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively, her posture exuding both indignation and irritation, as though she were the one being wronged. Thomas studied her, searching for the woman he had loved, but all he saw was a stranger, cloaked in indifference. "What are you doing, Jessica?" he asked, his voice weighted with unspoken pain. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation sparking within them. "You're making this into something it's not," she said, her tone dismissive, as if the entire situation was a misunderstanding. "Alex is just a friend. We're just having fun." "A friend?" Thomas echoed, his voice laced with disbelief. "Does a friend rest his hand on your shoulder and whisper in your ear? Do you laugh like that with just any friend?" His words carried the weight of raw emotion. An open wound lay bare before her. Jessica sighed, rolling her eyes as if his concerns were trivial. You're being ridiculous. Why do you always have to be so suspicious? The word stung like a slap. Suspicious, he repeated, frustration tightening his chest. If this is what trust looks like, then maybe we should. His voice faltered, the anger that had built within him suddenly collapsing under the weight of hurt. The words hung between them, unspoken yet deafening in their presence. Jessica hesitated, the silence stretching uncomfortably before she merely shrugged. If you're so uncomfortable, maybe you should just leave. I'm enjoying myself. With that, she turned away, rejoining Alex without a second glance, as if their confrontation had never happened. As if Thomas's heart hadn't just fractured into irreparable pieces. The hum of laughter and conversation continued around him, indifferent to his anguish, a cruel reminder of the life slipping through his fingers. Stepping outside, he was met with a stark stillness. The muffled sounds of the bar faded behind him, but inside his head, chaos reigned. Images of Jessica, her laughter, her lingering touch, the whispered words exchanged with Alex, looped relentlessly, each one twisting deeper into his chest. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Jessica. Are you okay? You know I love you, right? He stared at the screen, a bitter smile creeping onto his lips before he switched off his phone. Was this what love was supposed to look like? If so, he no longer recognized it. He felt adrift, lost in an ocean of confusion and pain. That night, he sat alone in the dimly lit living room, grappling with a singular question. What happened to us? The laughter that once filled their home with warmth now felt like a cruel blade, carving deeper wounds into his soul. He couldn't shake the memory of what Jessica had whispered to Alex before she followed Thomas away. The thought alone sent fresh waves of agony crashing over him. By morning, the fire of his anger had dulled to embers, simmering beneath the surface, replaced by something colder, resolve. When Jessica finally returned home, she wore the same clothes from the night before, her hair slightly tousled as if she had slept in them. Morning, she greeted casually as if nothing had happened. Thomas didn't respond immediately, his eyes fixed on her, the silence between them thick with unspoken truths. And then, something within him shifted. He couldn't continue like this. A decision settled in his mind. He needed the full truth, to confront the reality he had been avoiding for far too long. Taking a slow sip of his coffee, he finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with a quiet finality. Jessica, he said, avoiding her gaze. Thomas felt the weight of unspoken words pressing down between them. We need to talk about last night. Jessica hesitated, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup before she shrugged. What's there to discuss? I was just spending time with a friend, she said, her tone dismissive, as if downplaying the gravity of what had happened could make it disappear. Thomas exhaled slowly, setting his cup down with careful precision. Stop lying to me, he said, his voice steady but edged with disappointment. I already know the truth. Jessica's expression shifted in an instant, a fleeting glimpse of panic and guilt before she composed herself again. But Thomas had seen it. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice faltering despite her attempt at control. Without a word, Thomas reached into his pocket and placed an envelope on the table. Its presence alone was heavy with implication. Jessica hesitated before picking it up, her fingers trembling as she pulled out its contents. Photos, screenshots of messages, hotel receipts, every undeniable proof of what she had tried to keep hidden. Her complexion turned ghostly pale as the weight of her actions sank in. Thomas, she began, but the words withered in her throat, trapped in the web of her own deception. What can you possibly say, Jessica? He pressed, his voice laced with barely contained fury. That it was just a mistake? That it didn't mean anything? No excuse can undo what you've done. Tears pooled in her eyes, a silent admission of the pain she had inflicted. I owe you an explanation, she whispered, regret trembling in her voice. Thomas let out a sharp, bitter laugh that cut through the tension. No, he said coolly, the finality in his tone unmistakable. What you owed me was honesty, and you threw that away. A suffocating silence settled between them, stretching unbearably as Jessica carefully placed the envelope back on the table. Her shoulders shook as she wiped away a tear. "I love you," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I never meant for this to happen." His chest ached at her words, but his resolve remained unshaken. "If you loved me," he said quietly, "you wouldn't have done this." His voice was steady, but behind it lay an irrevocable truth. This relationship was everything to me. Now, it's nothing. Desperation flared in Jessica's eyes as she reached for him, her voice trembling with urgency. "Tell me what to do. How do I fix this?" Thomas inhaled deeply, his decision final. "I want you to leave," he said, the weight of it settling over him like a shroud. "If you ever want a chance to be in my life again, you'll have to prove you've changed. That means therapy, real effort. But right now, there's no place for you here." Jessica's hands shook as she gathered her things, the reality of her choices sinking in. When she reached the door, she turned back one last time, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Thomas didn't answer. The door clicked shut behind her, and he stood in the silence she left behind. The echoes of their conversation swirled in his mind. But for the first time in a long while, solitude felt like peace. The uncertainty of whether she would ever change lingered, but one thing was certain. He had reclaimed his self-respect, and that was worth more than anything he had lost.